There we are. Good morning, everybody. Testing.
Can you hear me?
Thank you for attending this morning's planning meeting. We will be reminded, as usual, you'll be reminded about microphone protocol, and I'm basically going to say make sure that you switch it on when you want to speak and switch it off when you've finished. It's easily done to leave it on. I've done it myself, so just do the best you can. Are there any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Chair. I use the doggy day. I don't use doggy daycare. I use the dog walking fields on the first application.
Right.
I think I declare a personal. Yeah.
That's just personal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think that means you can take part in the debate and vote, doesn't it? So there we go.
Yeah, just to clarify for everybody, that is operated by a different business to the applicant business. If that helps.
But it's good to know you've declared that. Thank you for that. That's helpful. Confirmation of minutes, please. Are we all agreed they're an accurate record of the 8th of October planning meeting? Good morning. So that's all those in favour? Yes. Okay. I know you weren't here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Substitute members, are there any substitute members this morning? Well, I know there are, I'm just getting it confirmed.
Yes, we've got Councillor Collins in for Councillor Gardner. That's it, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Collins. Decision item are 3 this morning, and we're going to deal with them numerically in order 1, 2 and 3. Also, before we get to item 2, can I draw your attention to a late observation sheet which you should have in front of you. It won't take long to look at, but if you haven't had a look at it, certainly before we start item 2, I'll just make sure that you've all had a chance to refer to the detail in that report.
We can have a moment's recess to do that if necessary.
Exactly,
Chairman.
yes, but it's a fairly...
Chairman, I can cover it in the presentation,
okay,
relatively straightforward.
Okay, that's fine. There are no speakers this morning, no members in the public gallery, so I think members are aware of the protocol of the meeting and how we operate. So we're going to move swiftly on to... could I just say a welcome back to Councillor Farrington, who's been absent through some ill health, and we're very, very pleased to see him back. So, yes, thank you for coming. Yeah. All right, good to see you. So we move to item 1, which is on page 5 of your report, and I'm going to move to Andrew with the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman, and morning, everyone. This one, isn't it? Okay, this application relates to a property, or it's a site called Moss Side Farm, which is on Lytham Road at Moss Side. So it's quite close to Moss Side Rail Halt, which is roughly halfway between Ray Green and Saltcoats end of Lytham. Just to locate where it is. So as I said, the site's part of Moss Side Farm, which is the farm itself's on the southern side of Lytham Road. It's on the southern side of Lytham Road, and this site is actually on the northern side, which I've got some images to show you later. The farm itself, there isn't any actual farm in there. That all terminated with foot and mouth some years back, so there's now quite a lot of industrial activity that takes place at that site. The application proposal is to demolish a building where there is currently a relatively modest kennel and dog daycare operation and build a new facility elsewhere on this farmland. and we're here at committee because of there are objections from the parish council on highway and on amenity grounds. So just to put the arrangements into perhaps a visual context, this is zoomed in. So this is Moss Side Rail Halt. This is Lytham Road coming through to Lytham here. Moss Side Farm is this area here. So you've got the farmhouse here, a series of what were cattle buildings, and there's some shipping containers used for storage and various other industrial activities that take place in this location. The dog field operation that operates from the site is from these fields here, and there is an existing kennel facility that takes place, kennel operation that takes place from a converted stable building, which is this building here. The application site that we're looking at is over here, so it's on the other side of the road, further away from the farm operations, and it's accessed by this farm track, which serves a farm which is just off the image here, and then this was a farm and has now been converted to a series of holiday lets. So these sort of lighter grey buildings are now a series of holiday lets. So this is existing kennel operation, clearly converted stables, used for daycare in this building, which is in the, it's an L-shaped building, so that's at the junction of the L's. Get the gist of it from that. The application building, or the application site is, as I said, on the other side of the road. There is an existing, relatively dilapidated building on the site known as the Maggot Barn, which you can see from these Google Street View images here. And then in closer views, this is the building as it currently stands on the site. So it's, as far as I'm aware, it's not in any active use, although the land around it is used for storing hay. So this is a sort of a zoomed in aerial image of that building. So that's the building I've just shown you. This is rolls of hay that are stored around it, access track from Lytham Road. So the application proposal is to demolish that building, construct a new building which would provide kennelling and daycare facilities. Externally, there's a couple of different dog play exercise areas, parking area, and then an in and out access arrangement onto this access track. That's all surrounded by a compound which is formed by there's a mound to be constructed, 2 metre mound, with a fence on the inside. So it's fence, mound, and then planting around the outside of that compound. So looking at the building that's proposed, the top images are the existing building. The bottom ones are the proposed buildings. So the buildings are very similar in size to what's currently there. The new building is very similar in size. Internally, this is the layout that we've got. So reception facility, a run of 8 kennels, 2 separate internal dog daycare exercise areas, presumably similar to the one I showed you in the existing building on the earlier image, a staff room, and then an office area here. The staff room is provides sleeping accommodation because that is one of the requirements of the kennel licence, that there is an overnight presence on the site. So there is a condition that ensures that is used for those purposes only, although clearly it's not of any scale that could be used residentially. The final image I've got for you is an aerial image looking the other way, just to perhaps try and illustrate the relationship of the building. You've got this access track, Lytham Road, the existing farmhouse and the existing agricultural, or formerly agricultural buildings at Moss Side Farm there. So we have had quite a number of representations about this application. they've largely been related to highways and noise. I think that there has been accidents on this bend, largely due to perhaps speeding traffic coming up this straight section and getting to a 90-degree bend. But the Highway Authority don't have any concerns, which I'll cover later. The other concerns have been about amenity, particularly from dogs barking in this location and the proximity to these residential properties here. So looking at the sort of planning issues that it raises, the site's in the countryside, so policy GD4 applies. As we pretty much say every meeting, that's quite a restrictive policy, but has some exceptions. One of those exceptions is where there are uses that are appropriate for a rural area. Now, dog kennel activities, dog exercise activities are typically found in rural areas. They're one of the things that farms have diversified into. You've got the space, you've got the separation from neighbours. So that is something that we would say dog kenneling is an appropriate rural activity. So we're accepting that the principle satisfies the requirements of policy GD4 in principle. That doesn't mean it's perfectly fine. We need to look at the other impacts. So looked at landscaping. Obviously, I showed you the street view images. The site is visible over the hedges. It's a flat landscape, and you see over the hedges to the existing building. And that's one of the reasons that the application's been with us for a time, because we've been looking at how the balance is struck between providing amenity protection, acoustic protection for the site, without it appearing overly engineered in what is quite a flat and open landscape. That's resulted in the current scheme with there's a lower bund than there was previously, there's a slightly lower fence than there was previously, and there's more landscaping than there was previously. So we feel that we've got to the right sort of balance, if you will, in terms of that. In terms of the building, there is a building on the site. This is similar in its scale. It's designed with typical agricultural design and form. It's not a modern brick building by any means. It's a steel framed clad building. So we feel that as a building in the landscape, it sits comfortably in that rural landscape, where if you are looking at it from Lytham Road, you see the converted farm to one side, you see the existing farm to the other, and then you'd see this building in the middle. So it would sit in that rural landscape. So that brings me to amenity, and the noise objections have been the area of greatest concern to us. Greatest objection been received from those, and that's where we've got to this situation where we have this site that's got this perimeter compound with fencing and the mound and landscaping. The building itself is designed with appropriate insulation to address sort of barking dogs issues that can arise and have arisen from the existing building, which is just a brick stable, so it doesn't have that level of insulation. There are hours controls over the number of dogs, hours controls over when the site operates and when dogs can be exercised. The kennels, there's 8 kennels, so it's relatively modest in terms of its scale anyway. So there's 8 dogs overnight, and there's 30 permitted for the daycare element. And then the final bullet there talks about the separation distances. So whilst you can see the neighbouring properties, they are all a fair distance away in terms of physical separation to the properties. So looking at those issues, obviously discussed it at some detail with the council's environmental protection team, and they're now satisfied with the findings of the applicant's acoustic assessment have concluded that there wouldn't be any noise issues that would justify a refusal of the application. So that brings me to final slide. Talked briefly on the access. It's obviously a well-established access point to Lytham Road. It's used to a degree by the existing farms and the holiday let use. There have been accidents, as I've said. The last recorded accident was just over 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago now. There's no indication that that was due to this access track, but that's obviously something that is looked at when we get applications that change the nature of highway use. But having looked at that, LCC as the Highway Authority are very clear that there's no objections to the application. One thing that they have requested is that passing places are introduced into the track, because you're going to have, particularly with the daycare element, you're going to have vehicles coming and going at the same sort of time where people are dropping the dogs off and picking them up again. The track is only single track width, single vehicle width, so there is a condition that talks about putting a passing place into that track. Excuse me. The next bullet there talks about ecology. So as with any countryside application, there's been an preliminary ecological appraisal. Now, go back to one of my pictures, there are some ponds in the area. One of those has had great crested newt activity in the past. We've also been sent images to indicate that barn owls have been using the building for nesting in this current year. So those findings don't prevent development, but they do require that there's appropriate mitigation and further checks put in place to make sure that those species aren't harmed by the development. So there are conditions that refer to replacement nesting facilities for barn owls, talk about mitigation during construction to ensure that great crested newts aren't in the area when the buildings are demolished and aren't able to get into the area whilst construction takes place. So those are standard techniques that are used in such circumstances and address those issues. Drainage, obviously always important. The proposal here is to form, obviously there's no drainage on site at the moment, it just bounces off the building and falls onto the ground. So with this proposal there will be drainage introduced that will collect into a holding tank and then be released into a watercourse which is off to the west. Foul water will be treated the same way. Obviously the toilets introduced into the building, so there's a need to have a treatment plant to deal with foul waste from the site. Finally, there are a series of conditions, probably a slightly lengthy list of conditions covering the matters I've talked about there. There's also a condition which ensures that the existing building is taken out of being in a kennel use, so that reverts back to what it was previously, which was either stables or some other form of domestic outbuilding for the farm property that exists. So with all that, the sort of summary of the position is that the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions and the standard biodiversity net gain condition that is needed.
Thank you, Andrew. So we go to questions and then the debate. So I've got Councillor Goodman down. So Councillor Goodman.
Thank you very much. Please could we see the slide showing the old building heights and the new? Do we know if the new is any taller, wider?
Yeah, put in the box in the top right, I've put the dimensions there. So the new building is very slightly shorter, is very slightly wider, and is 1.5 metres lower.
Okay.
So it's smaller than the existing building. The existing building is a single-storey barn building, but it's obviously it's because of its agricultural storage use, it's quite tall for that building. So this building is more squat. It doesn't. They don't need the height for a single storey, so it's a lower building in the landscape.
Can I just, Chair, ask a couple more questions relating to that, please?
Yep.
The second one is that you mentioned there were hay bales around it. Do we know if they're going to be removed back to the farm, or will they be retained in that area?
I'm fairly sure that they will be removed elsewhere. I'm not sure that whenever I've been to the site, there's always been the same hay bales there. So I'm not sure there's a rotation of bales. Right. I think they may just be a legacy from either this farm using them or other farms just using it as an area to store their hay. I don't know, other than you can see from this image that the current site is large. The current site is a kind of a corner, a tangent from the field. The application site is a larger area, so the area where the bales are will be part of this application site, but where they go to and who owns them and what other arrangements there are, I'm afraid I don't know.
Yeah, no problem. And lastly, you've got me worrying about the barn owls now. So they don't build nests, they just use crevices in buildings, sometimes in trees. So I think the nesting season is March to August. So there should be no problem depending on when the work starts, I guess. But I don't suppose they're going to be easily going into a brand new building. Maybe they'll find areas elsewhere.
Yeah, there is actually a barn owl nest box inside the building. So that's what they've used for nesting.
Okay.
So, as you say, they would need something to utilise. So that's what's happened. The condition would refer to a replacement for that being put elsewhere on the site, rather than the building providing it, because a building that's obviously used in low-key agricultural storage is perhaps much more peaceful and suitable for barn owls to nest in, like that, than a modern stable, a model kennel building that's going to have a lot of activity and barking dogs and what have you. So there would be a condition to make sure that it's replaced elsewhere within the site.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
If I may, just on that point, Councillor Goodman, conditions 13 and 14 on page 27 may inform you further on that.
Thank you. Councillor Pittman.
Thank you.
Yeah, the passing places, I haven't put a plan of them into the presentation actually, but the proposal is to widen this is the access track, obviously. That single vehicle width. The proposal is at the midpoint between the access point and the road is to provide a widening of the carriageway, which, because of the area between the two hedges, there isn't space to get a second vehicle on one side, so it's a half a vehicle on both sides type of widening arrangement, and that would be, from the plans, it's showing it being a typical single car length. So you wouldn't get the milk tanker wouldn't be able to utilise it, for example. But that's obviously the situation now where the milk tanker, if the milk tanker was to meet a vehicle coming to this property or one of the holiday lodges associated with this property, that would still be an issue for it. So it's not going to cater for every vehicle that uses that route, but it is just a single farm, albeit an active one that's you know, when I've visited that site, there's a lot of cows. But we feel that is the appropriate solution for it, rather than something that's perhaps a more intensive engineering that then might involve removal of these hedges and perhaps impacts on the rural landscape. So there's always a sort of a balance to be struck between, you know, you could make that track 2 cars wide, for example, but you would end up there with perhaps disproportionate level of engineering for the situation that it's likely to take. So that's why this passing place idea has been put forward and has been accepted by the Highway Authority.
Some sort of signage to say that vehicles really are have to use these passing places if there is agricultural stuff on that road. It's only a track, but there are going to be more vehicles. If this dog takes off, there could very easily be some quite large 4x4s, etc. down there, and these passing places have to be ready to take them, and the milk tankers and, you know, the feed lorries, etc. are going to encounter difficulties.
Could I just interject? In a sense, when you're looking at that road, it's a very short road. It's very straight. So as soon as you enter it, you can see basically potential problems ahead anyway. It's not like it goes round the bend and you don't know what's facing you there. I mean, I don't know what the length of it is, but it looks a fairly short road and fairly straight in terms of, I'm not sure whether there's a requirement for, I have seen signs, I think, saying passing places or something. So that's my only thought, is that it would be for the local highways authority to deem it necessary to have a sign of that kind, rather. I'm just helping, but we'll go back to the officer.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, there is the tracks in, well, starting back, the tracks in private ownership, so it's not a highway matter. It's not in the same way that if the passing place was to be on Lytham Road, Lancashire County Council would want to make sure that the specification is suitable for it to be a highway. This is just an assistance on an existing privately owned track that presumably there are just legal rights to the existing properties to use. Condition 6 on page 25 says, deals with this and says that prior to the first operational use of the kennel building, a scheme for the construction and surface treatment of the additional passing places to be formed on the farm track shall be submitted and approved, and then these shall be implemented. One suggestion could be to add to construction and surface treatment, we could add signage as an additional detail that's provided to address that condition.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, if it's a private road and we think would be helpful, they could put a sign up themselves, couldn't they?
Exactly.
Making them aware.
The
I'm not convinced personally it's necessary, but you know, if it's what people feel assured that is required, I'm not sure what people think about that.
Well, if you're visiting for the first time new customers to this daycare for dogs, they might not be aware that it is a road where they could get they would have to reverse possibly.
Yeah, I do take, sorry to cut Councillor Pittman off, but I do take the point on that. So I'm more than happy to include that within the condition requirements if that can be put to the committee if and when we get to the resolution.
Could I also ask about the noise? Have there ever been reports of noise from the existing boarding that have been reported to the council? Because that was obviously much smaller than this is going to extend, and it could actually grow even larger.
Yes, there have. There have been, this image is thankfully helpful. So the existing kennels are in this building here that's just underneath the words Dogfield. That's a stable building there. They have been using this sand paddock for outdoor exercise, and that has generated complaints, or complaints have been generated about the business, particularly from properties in this location here. But also from properties down here. So that's been one of the areas that sort of this level of complaint about the existing operation has led to the focus that we've had on the amenity aspects and the noise nuisance. The application has been submitted with an acoustic assessment to support it, and that looks at the range of the times that the dogs are there, the times that they are able to use the external areas for exercise, the level of insulation of the building, the provision of mounds and acoustic fencing around the site, and that obviously you've got a greater distance as well. So with all those factors, the acoustic assessment concludes that a properly managed operation over here would not lead to justifiable complaints from properties here, unlike the situation that we have here where you've got a converted stable without any insulation, you've got a sand paddock that doesn't have any acoustic protection, you've got a much closer relationship. Yes, you've got some road noise and some rail noise that you perhaps don't have in this area, but part of the idea of locating the building over here was to try and address the neighbour amenity concerns that's this operation is generated, whilst allowing the business to grow. At the moment, it's a converted stable building, so it's physically restricted by the size of that building. This has been designed to cater for a larger number of dogs than are currently permitted at that site, and allow the business to operate and expand in a way that avoids the impact on particularly these neighbours, but also the holiday guests at the site up the road.
Can I just ask about when the dogs are outside? Obviously, the more dogs you put together, the more noise you're going to get. There are restrictions on, or shall we say there are, there should be some sensible numbers of dogs and size of dogs in terms of what you put together to exercise at any one time, I would have thought. Because small dogs might not make as much noise as larger dogs. Put them together. Not necessarily. I can appreciate it. It doesn't always follow. But it is important that the outside area is also subject to the noise problem, and therefore they could end up with complaints about noise from the outside.
It's on page 19, Sandra says.
Yeah.
A maximum of 5 dogs.
Yeah, but they come in all shapes and sizes, don't they?
A maximum of 5
And some
dogs
make more
outside
noise.
at any time.
Yeah, some make more noise than others.
Yeah, I think there are controls.
Thank you, Councillor Nixon. That's the section of the report I was trying to find. The noise, the acoustic assessment that was submitted with the application sits alongside a management report that was submitted, which which is referred to as one of the conditions. And that deals with the number of dogs, which is, as you say, is restricted to 5 dogs at any one time. There isn't that restriction on the existing operation. So, and we don't have a way of realistically bringing in that level of control over the existing operation, which is why when we are looking at a new facility, we're doing that with our eyes open in terms of what's happened at the existing arrangement, to make sure that it's controlled to a way that obviously allows the business to operate, but does so in a way that, you know, you're restricting the duration of outdoor exercise, you're restricting the number of animals that can be exercised at any one time, and you're obviously providing this acoustic protection around the site that's just not there at present.
Thank you. Thanks.
There's also a reference, isn't there, on page 11 from the environmental protection about the modelling that they've used, worst case scenario modelling in terms of noise assessment. So they clearly, you know, that's what they do. They look at things like that, and they've been satisfied that the restrictions and the management of this will be okay. I suppose the other point is that, you know, if there were subsequently a number of complaints, that would be for environmental protection and health to deal with, and they would not want that, so they will manage it sensitively, I would have expected. But it's right to ask about, you know, conditions and things like that, because we do know, although I have to say, as I said before, small dogs, big dogs, that can be a very deceptive distinction. Knowing a small dog very well can fight its corner in terms of noise with any big dog, I can assure you sometimes. But it's a valid point you've raised, but I think reading the report, I'm particularly satisfied. Yeah, of course you can.
Just very briefly, building on that, the people who've within the council, the officers within the council who've been advising me on this, the noise aspect, are the officers who've been involved in investigating the complaints about the existing facility. So they're not going to want to allow something that's going to create those further complaints further down the road. So that they've looked at it with that mind. And there is this technical way that you look at or assess noise from all sorts of sources, and you look at the worst case scenario with dogs, that every dog in that facility will be barking at the same time, and that's the noise it creates. Now that's unlikely to happen, but they'll look at that kind of worst case scenario that informs these assessments.
Thank you, Councillor Pittman. Councillor Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the one point I'm not clear about reading through, I might have missed the nuances, is whether the existing walk-in field is going to be defunct or whether it's still going to be in use, and that's a question that some of the neighbours ask as well, I notice. And then I've got supplementaries based on the answer that you give me.
Yes.
Okay, my supplementary is, in that case, is how safe is it to walk the dogs up there? That would, to me, to be the more concerning than the vehicle passing.
Yeah, the dog field is actually over here. There's a polytunnel behind that hedge. So these fields are where the dog fields, and when I catch the train to work, I regularly see people using those fields there. I'm not certain that the dog field is a realistic area for the animals from this site to be walked to, particularly if there are external exercise areas within this compound that's being formed at this site. Now, whether they would drive over to this site, because you can see there is car parks there that you provided for the dog field, as Councillor Goodman will no doubt be aware of. That is obviously an option, but I think as a walking route, if you were a member of staff taking a dog for exercise over there, I doubt that you would walk that way.
Okay, I think that needs to be nailed down in terms of actual process, because the assumption that's left as an assumption. and just looking at the exercise yard, to me, it doesn't look to be of a suitable size that would fulfil the animal welfare requirements of long-stayed dogs, particularly that require a lot of exercise. So actually, I think the walking field, looking at that exercise yard, because it's in two bits, they're not big areas. You know, if you have something like a border collie that wants to go mad for 2 hours, or a spaniel, you know, you need a bigger space really. So I think it does need to be pinned down what the requirements are, whether they're going to use that field and how they're going to access that field.
Just point out whether this is relevant, Councillor Farrington, that on page 12 there's a licensing paragraph there where it talks about DEFRA standards, etc. being applied, minimum standards relating to the suitable environment for the boarding of the dogs. The operator should consider these conditions, particularly in terms of kennel sizing and exercise when installing kennels. That's the sort of area you would have expected the licensing to be looking at, Andrew? You know, just to try and be helpful here, because I think you're right, it's an area that might rise, you know, give rise to some concern in terms of how they manage it, but there is this licensing agreement, licensing of activities involving animals, you know, and DEFRA standards.
It talks about a 5-star standard on the existing site that's been just slightly nullified by the issues over the environmental concerns with the noise, etc. But it doesn't follow if they then don't use the field, that those standards will be maintained. That's my point, really.
It actually mentions at the bottom, doesn't it? Given the logistics of taking dogs to exercise, the distance and road between, it actually states this, a suitable and sufficient risk assessment would be required, which should also reflect the staffing levels for when staff are off site. So that needs to be sort of emphasised. That might be the answer.
That was definitely within licensing, I would say.
Yeah,
Chairman.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Just to interrupt, there is a footway. So whilst I've talked about getting to the dog field by driving, there is, you've obviously got the track to walk down, but once you get to the highway, there is a footway that allows, it's not as if it's a country lane that you're walking in the road, so there is that opportunity to make that journey if there was to be a further pedestrian route walking the dogs down to this location that way.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the relationship with the existing facility and residents who could hear the noise coming from it, but those points have been addressed, particularly with the bund, it's further away. Getting back to Councillor Pittman's point about having a sign, any large driver of a large vehicle will be going down there quite regularly. You know, they'll know there's a passing place. People going to the facility will be, I should imagine a lot of them will be regular. You know, I drive a large van and, you know, you don't need a sign saying passing place. You know, you see it, you've got common sense. Presumably people who are driving about have some common sense. If there's a passing place, people know it's there. There's absolutely no need for a sign, in my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. Given that this is moving, from that picture alone, you sort of get the impression that this is moving the dogs and the facility into a more remote area away from properties, people, buildings, which then gives dogs less opportunity to bark. There's not as many distractions, there's not as many things that would make a dog bark as much. There's nothing to see, so they just get on with doing whatever they're doing. My own personal view on dog daycare is, well, if you need to get dog daycare, don't get a dog. But that's not the issue. Yes, people go on holiday, That's kennels, that's a different matter, but to put your dog in a kennel all day, every day. But I'm actually happy to support this because it is a facility that is needed and people do use, and it's a business in an area that is obviously viable for that type of business. It's in a field, and the licensing and all the welfare that goes along with it is not our planning department's issue really. But yeah, I'd be happy to support it and propose it.
Bring Andrew in, but the one thing that occurs to me in response to something you said is that there's clearly a demonstrable need, whether we think it's justifiable in terms of what we think, in terms of the existing business, because remember, this is a replacement business. They've already got an existing business, they're just moving it into a site, as you say, that is perhaps more remote. But if there's any doubt about need, I think you can see the expansion of the business sort of is partly based on that assumption, I think. Okay. I'm going to bring Andrew back in.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just add a bit of context to the point that Councillor Nixon made there. We've had this application with us for a while, and one of the sort of matters we have discussed is whether the building could be located on this side of the road, somewhere near the existing farm buildings, where it is perhaps less intrusive in the landscape. You don't have this farm access track because you've got a good access to this site through here. And the point's been made to us that you've got those industrial activities taking place there. You've got these shipping containers. You've got some coffee services. You've got a lot of people coming and going there, which is generating quite a lot of trigger noises that will set the dogs off barking. So that is one of the reasons that this location over here was felt to be preferable as an alternative to using this field here, for example, at the back of the site for it, because that would still be in dog earshot of people opening these shipping container doors and dropping some scaffolding panels into it, and that's the kind of thing that, from my understanding, is likely to set dogs off barking.
Councillor Settle.
Thank you, Chairman. As you've just mentioned earlier, there is a need for dog care facilities, and as it says on page 16 at the top, it's much preferable to have them in these rural locations than in the heart of a town. I mean, there are quite a few in the middle of St Anne's, right next to streets of houses. So this location, 120 metres from the nearest houses, seems to me like absolutely ideal, and it's an improvement on the existing facilities. So I'm very happy to second it.
When you say seconding, I don't think we've had a formal proposal. Was that a formal proposal? Okay, all right. So we have a proposer and a seconder. Do we have any more questions or comments? No. So can we?
Chairman,
yes. Just
before we do go to the vote, we've had discussion about whether signage should be added into the requirements for condition 6. I know it was Councillor Pittman that mentioned it, but it's perhaps if Councillor Nixon and Councillor Settle have a view on whether that should be added in or not, that would be helpful.
I think Councillor Collins covered my point. As we can see there, it's a perfectly straight road. As you're coming into it, you can see whether there's any vehicle coming in the opposite direction. And as he also said, if you're coming there regularly with your dog, you know exactly where the passing place is. So I don't think you really need a sign in that pretty short stretch.
Thank you. If I may on that point, Chairman, I think I draw a parallel with the track up to the road up to Lytham Hall, which is a lot longer, a lot less straight, has multiple passing places, and that I don't think there's a need for signs. I think too much signage on roads can add confusion where none existed before, so I'd be happy to support it without the signage.
Just one question before we move to the vote. The point about clarification in terms of dog movements, etc., and this business of licensing. If we want to emphasise that, is there a way of or is it already covered in any of the conditions to some extent? it was the point that I think we were trying to answer with Councillor Farrington, wasn't it? Yeah, sort of, because it does actually say licensing in that. Further clarification would be appreciated regarding the reference to the dog fields, either to be taken to these fields for additional exercise, given the logistics of the exercise. Do we need to ensure that that is, perhaps a request for more clarification? Or that's come from licensing, so it will be up to licensing to pursue that, would it?
Chairman, I wonder if the 2 paragraphs above what you just read out cover it, that if there is a dispute between the two, then the lower figure should apply. I think that's from my experience on licensing, is fairly standard.
I think you have 2 ways of dealing with it, Chairman. Okay. You either accept that it is something that's part of the licensing requirements, which I think, and leave it for that to be dealt with, or condition 7, which implements the management plan that's been submitted. That's what I was getting. It could be added into a replacement for that management plan. Yeah. If you wanted that comfort, as one suggestion would be to delegate the decision to officers to allow for the decision to be made once either further clarification on that point has been sought, and if necessary, a replacement management plan that dealt with the mechanics of exercising dogs in a remote, potentially in a remote location.
That, but I just want to bring Councillor. Yes, come on.
Thank you. When I use the dog fields, you book online a slot. It's only the people that have booked those fields. It isn't doggy daycare that you're coming in with. So it's actually allocated for...
But the daycare arrangements, if the daycare arrangements were using those fields,
they'd have to book it.
They would book. They would block book.
Yeah, well, yeah,
slots,
but then they wouldn't get their regular users.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Griffiths. I mean, I would prefer some sort of reference to it in that condition 7, I think.
Well, that would need to be done. Sorry. My view is that would need to be done through a revision to the recommendation to delegate it to officers to allow us to deal with that.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I'm happy with that. What about everybody else? Yes, happy with that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, with that, can we move to the vote? You're proposing it, Councillor Nixon. You're seconding it, Councillor Settle. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. That was unanimous.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. Page 32, item 2.
Sorry, I'm just making a note for the...
Chairman, did we want a 2-minute recess to allow members to read the late obs? I know
I can cover it pretty
straightforward. I think it will be covered anyway. Andrew will go through that, I think so, and it's fairly short.
Fair enough.
It's relating to drainage, so it's important that we do understand it.
Sorry about the delay, guys. Okay. This application relates to an area of land at Snowdrop Grove in Wharton. So this is an image of Wharton Village, hopefully fairly logical to everybody. Lytham Road coming through the middle of the village, the crossroads and the main gate to BAE here. So going north towards Ray Green, you've got Church Road, Burley Arms, and then you've got Harbour Lane, which come this way. So this is an area of land kind of between those 2 roads. It's currently in use as open space, which is associated with a residential development that occurred in the village about 10 years ago, although it's not formally designated as open space. The application in front of us is to erect 4 2-storey dwellings on the site, and we sat committee because of some comments that were made by the parish council, which I think you interpret as an objection when you read them, relating to the loss of the open space, and they also refer to a watercourse adjacent to the site, which I will come to later. The officer recommendation is already to delegate the decision to officers. That's to allow an ownership matter to be resolved, a procedural matter that's cropped up. But there is a second matter that I'm adding to that in the late observations relating to drainage, which I'll cover in the presentation. So this is a closer image of the site. So Harbour Lane's here, Church Road's just off the plan here, and this is what was the 9-acre nurseries development. So about 10 years ago, 66 houses were approved on this site and obviously have been built. The red area here is the application site. I put these blue squares to indicate other areas of open space within that wider development, in case that's of help later. So just to give you a bit of chronology of what happened, the red square is the same area on each of these images. So 2005, nothing there. 2015, the 9-acre nursery development was built, with this area, the whole area at the head of that cul-de-sac being set aside for open space. There was then a planning permission granted for residential development of the majority of that. So there's a further 9 houses built here, 2018. And then the current situation is that you've got the Blackfield End Farm, Miller Homes site that's been built to the west of that. And so whilst that's accessed off Church Road, which is here, that effectively butts up to this site and ensures that it's now enclosed by residential development on 3 sites. So these are a couple of site pictures. So this is this is the application site here. So you can see the existing properties. These were on the first phase of 9-acre nurseries. These are on the latter phase, one of the latter 9. And then these properties here are on the Miller Homes, Blackfield End Farm site. That's just looking the other way to show the other properties that were built most recently on that development. So the scheme that we've got is for 4 houses. 3 are type A, 1 is type B, located in a row, and they are designed as a continuation of the existing properties that you just saw on the right-hand picture. These are the house types, fairly standard stuff. 3 of them 2-bedroomed, 1 of them 3-bedroomed, the one at the end, the larger property at the end. That's that image again. So looking at the main issues, apologies for there being so many words, but the site's in the settlement area, so it's in the village of Wharton boundary. Wharton's one of the strategic locations for development in the local plan, and that's obviously where the local plan promotes new development. So there is that sort of policy support in the local plan for residential development in those locations. And obviously you saw from the early images that this site is well connected to the settlement through pedestrian links and has residential properties around it on at least 3 of the sites, well, on 3 of the sites. And the main sort of query from my perspective has been around the loss of the open space. Obviously we put open space into new developments with the idea of it being available for the use of the residents that live on those developments. We do that in accordance with policies that talk about quantitative amounts of open space. So many bed spaces on the development equals so many square metres of open space. Even if this site were taken out of that availability, the remainder of the open space on that site would meet the quantitative requirements for the development. So there is effectively a surplus of open space on this site, which means that the loss of it doesn't create any conflict with the open space provision policies. Obviously there's a subjective harm because the people who live there are not able to use it, albeit it's not something that's been particularly contentious as an application. We've had 4 letters opposed to the application, but given how close a number of properties are to it, it's not generated a massive volume of opposition compared to other applications that we've had where open space is being removed. That kind of makes me think that the open space is not significantly valued. It's not well laid out, it's not well landscaped, it doesn't offer a lot of qualitative benefit to residents. So the officer view in this case is that the loss of it isn't something that's of overriding harm. I think we also need to be mindful of our current housing land supply position, where we had applications at the last committee meeting that were promoted and supported in the countryside areas. This is in a settlement area, so if we're supporting houses in the countryside to deal with the housing supply situation, perhaps we also should be taking a more lenient views on areas of open space where there are better areas of open space and enough areas of open space to meet resident needs. So that brings us to the point that the principle of the scheme is acceptable. Just sort of dropping through the other bullet points quickly, the site obviously has a good access. It was relatively recently built. The access to the Snowdrop Grove site is well developed. This scheme provides suitable parking. It does actually use the driveway to number 33, which is the end house, to provide access, but it provides replacement parking for that property. The dwellings are of a suitable scale, design, materials, what have you, for the street. Neighbour separations are all achieved. There are no ecological issues generated by the site. The scheme needs to provide its biodiversity net gain benefits, but that's a standard requirement of any development of this nature. The issue that's I wanted to draw more attention to is site drainage. Now, there's no indication with this application how drainage is to be dealt with for these properties, but they are well connected to the Snowdrop Grove site, so no doubt there will be capacity in its surface water and foul water connections to serve the site. There is a point made by the parish council that there is a ditch to the rear. So I've had a sort of a more close look into the drainage arrangements, and it seems that there is a possibility that the surface water drainage for the site, the Snowdrop Grove site, runs through this application land. Now, that's not something that United Utilities have referenced in their comments on the application when they made them back in July. And it's only when I was doing a bit more detailed look at it that it came to my attention on Friday last week. So I've gone back to United Utilities to ask them, is this right? It looks like it may go through there, but you've not mentioned it. What's the answer? So I've not had their comments back on that as yet. But if it is the case that United Utilities do have infrastructure that runs through this site, that would have fairly significant consequences for the development. If it's the case that it doesn't, then it has no consequences because there's nothing there. So my proposal to you through the late observations is that the existing delegation to officers be extended to allow for consideration of that drainage issue as and when United Utilities respond to me from the email I sent them last Friday. So with that having been said, the officer recommendation is as revised through the late observation papers, and is to delegate the decision to us, subject to those matters being satisfactorily resolved.
So if this drainage problem, looking at imposition of additional planning conditions, if what you discover is not acceptable, that could be a reason to refuse the application, you know, in terms of, you know, if you accept it now, there is that caveat that if that then becomes a demonstrable problem, then actually it wouldn't stand whatever we said here.
No, if there is drainage infrastructure that runs through the site and it's of a nature that can't be worked around, obviously there's not a lot of space in the site.
Yeah.
If the drainage is coming from here to here, one of the options may be to lose one of the plots, for example. So that's where I've tried to word the late observations to allow the opportunity for officers to deal with a revision to the scheme of that nature without the need to take further committee time coming back to deal with it. Obviously we would need to do further consultation with neighbours and with the parish council, but I would hope that officers are able to consider any comments made and amend the scheme if necessary, if that were the eventuality. But it's just an eventuality at this stage, so I don't know. Sorry, a possibility.
But what I'm saying is the implications of this could be quite serious in terms of the overall application. And
indeed,
therefore,
it could be, or it could be nothing at all.
I think we're asked to be mindful of that could be a determining factor, couldn't it, in terms of the application progressing.
Is it worth at that point?
Of course, yeah.
We're pointing out for the benefit of committee members that any delegation would have input or discussion with the chairman and vice chairman of planning.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be solely the officer that
No.
takes it through.
Yeah.
Just maybe puts people's minds at rest there.
Okay. Councillor Ledger.
Councillor Goodman.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, could I ask a couple of questions about the open spaces? Could you give a bit more, I guess, context, some history of the site in general? Because as it's come in stages, what were the original open spaces meant to be? What were they? Thanks. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll just,
Yeah,
sorry,
when
I spilled coffee. So my question was, could you just go into a bit more detail about the history of the open spaces on the site and what the other open spaces still would be?
Yeah, when the site was first developed, the first application stopped at that point, so it was that area there. There's an area of open space at the entrance, which has some sort of natural play equipment, logs and what have you, and that's kind of, obviously it's in the right place, it's overlooked, it's at the entrance to the site. That provides the main recreational open space play area for the development. There was an area, there's an area of open space here, which is primarily surrounding a pond, and there wasn't a time 10 years ago when this was being considered. There was an indication that pond may have supported great crested newts. So with that in mind, this area was left open and not developed to provide a connection between that pond, or potential connection for any newts or other amphibians in the area, to get to that pond from the open countryside beyond. Now, obviously, going back to my sequence of events pictures, there are other ponds here. Here, there's a pond over in this corner. A lot of that connectivity or potential connectivity has been lost through the later development. So when these later applications, particularly the Miller Holmes one at the side was looked at, there was no newt presence in that pond. So perhaps the efforts such to try and retain that connectivity to the pond hadn't been successful. There was no newt present in that location, and therefore the need to retain it as a potential commuting route through to it had unfortunately disappeared. So that was the main reason that there was this area at the top end of the site that was undeveloped. Obviously, as things have moved on and those 9 houses have now been built and the 350, whatever there is on the Miller Holmes site have been built, there is an even less chance of any newts ever getting back to that pond. And that's kind of sort of a second reason why the open space in this location has limited value in terms of open space, because that ecological benefit that it could have provided at some point 20 years ago, 10 years ago, is no longer present.
So, are you saying for that open space there that we're talking about developing on, that's more of a, we would only consider that for ecology or the environment, not as an open space for the residents or public to enjoy?
Yeah, you can see from this image here, it's never been laid out. There were never any requirements for it to be laid out as part of, with play equipment or with benches or paths to walk your dog through. And none of that. It's just an area that's been left over. I'm not entirely certain why it was never developed when these 9 were developed. I didn't deal with that application, and I've not looked into the history of what the situation was there. But because it's not needed in quantifiable terms, it's not needed in ecology terms, perhaps with the development that's since taken place beyond it, it serves limited value in terms of an outlook across that land to the countryside for the selling point for these properties. I think perhaps its value as open space has dissipated over time to the point where, particularly where we're in a situation where we've got a need for additional housing, that all those factors come together and say that granting permission to develop this land is the right thing to do at this point.
Okay, yeah, so my last question from me. I appreciate the point we've got to balance housing needs. I think my last question was around how certain are we that the residents don't just, use this, I don't know, in summer or whatever. It's a nice open space. They might, I don't know, take the dogs, take the kids, have a barbecue, whatever. It's if the residents have come to expect this as, open space, even if it's not technically meant for that, people will use it, and it might be a nice thing for the community and don't necessarily want them to lose it.
Yeah, and that's, I perhaps mentioned earlier about the number of comments we've had. There are obviously, there's 4 comments that have been written to oppose it and 1 that's in support, page 37. There's 9 properties on the more recent development. There's the other properties that surround it to the rear. So, fortunately, I don't know exactly where those four comments came from. But that's not indicating to me that there's a massive groundswell in support of keeping this particular area of open space. Particularly where there's the area at the entrance to the estate that is much more, much better laid out. It's it's well maintained. It's got facilities in it. It's got benches and paths and things that kids can climb up and down and all that sort of stuff. And that seems to be the area where the kind of communal focal point activities that you're referring to, Councillor, are more likely to take place.
And just to clarify, this, because it's interesting, this particular one, this space is technically non-designated open space. It is not designated open space in the local plan. So I think you referred, you know, possibly when this estate was developed, they've left some land for potential future development. And then have you made the point that my concern when I was looking at this was in terms of, are we policy compliant in terms of the existing residual open space that is provided? Is that sufficient, or by removing that, does it actually mean that there's a conflict there? Now, I've been assured that that's not the case, because that was a concern. And one of the things I've sort of looked at with this is in terms of the other way of looking at it, and I think actually, Councillor Ledger, you sort of alluded to this, is that there's an opportunity here for 4 homes, etc., you know, 4 houses that would add, you know, to the provision within this area, but not particularly conflicting with the required open space that is necessary, which I think is a factor.
Yeah,
Is that right?
just building up. There's 2 open space policies in the local plan. One which says new developments should provide this amount of open space, a quantum policy, which this scheme, as I said earlier, satisfies because the overall development provides more than that amount. The second policy is to protect areas of existing open space from being lost, and that refers to areas of open space that are designated in the plan as being areas of open space. So that's where the ice cream parlour was found to be an issue. Obviously, school playing fields, allotment sites, the green at St Anne's, all those areas which are designated for open space purposes are given a measure of protection by policies. That does include larger areas of open space within some newer development sites, but it doesn't relate to this land. This land isn't affected by that policy, so there is no policy conflict with the scheme that's been put forward today.
Councillor Goodman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if we could just go back to the slide that showed those open spaces that Councillor Ledger was referring to. I don't know the area at all, I'm afraid, only just going through Wharton into Freckleton, but that appears to be a field, and again I was working out, is it to the east of above it? Yes. Do we know what sort of area that is? Is it a privately owned land?
Yes, that's not part of the development site. That's the property that's just off there is a property just off the aerial image here, which is a horticultural property. So they've got a series of glass houses, and then this is their land. This is the edge of the settlement, so this is within the countryside.
So the house B, the 3-bedroomed one, which is right adjoining, I'm assuming all that will be properly divided from, so there's no entrance.
Yeah, that's right. There will be a boundary fence along that edge there between that land and the land to the north.
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pittman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased that there's going to be some questions for United Utilities, because this is an area where drainage has been an issue, and the Hillock Lane area with its ditch, and the fact that developers aren't always very careful in terms of finishing off problems and leaving pipes that discharge water and cause flooding. So it's an important area, and there's there's a lot of development around there, recent development in the last 30 years, that have actually contributed to the surface water. So it's important that they do check what is happening there. As I understand it, the developer who, shall we say, did this Snowdrop Grove development wasn't too bothered about finishing off this area to make it more pleasant an amenity. He left it in an unsatisfactory state. So consequently, and I have this basically from the parish council, the parish council weren't willing to do any work on it when the developer hadn't done his bit. So consequently, it has just been left in an unsatisfactory state, a natural state in which the developer had left it. So, yeah, the developer has done well because he can come back and say, okay, I'll tidy it up and put 4 more houses on it. So he's done quite well, but it could have been dealt with years ago to make it an amenity, but it wasn't, and the parish council wasn't playing ball either. I just put that in as a sort of explanation of why this has arisen.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pittman. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. Could you go back to the slide that shows sort of an aerial view? There, that one. Where the red square, the main road that is it a main road that runs along the side, sort of the back end of the development, or not?
Back end. I think Councillor Pittman's microphone's
It's certainly not a main road. It's just, oh, sorry. It's just a road that feeds into this particular area.
Yeah, to help you, this is Harbour Lane. This is where the access road comes from. Buttercup Way then becomes Snowdrop Grove, which is just a residential cul-de-sac. There's a change in levels between this site and this Miller Homes development.
Right. And that where that change in levels, is it like that?
This land is lower.
Yeah. Are people going to put gates in the back of that just to drop down to come? Would it make it more convenient to, because they're at the back end of an estate, if you will, aren't they? That you've got to go all the way through the estate to get in and out.
Yeah, I think with the levels, I think that may be quite challenging.
Right, okay. I know it is something people do if it makes their life easier. They just stick a hole in the back fence.
You're right. And this is a pedestrian. These are the cul-de-sacs, and that's a pedestrian cycle link that runs through. It's possible that there could be access points made to that, but yeah, it's a fair drop.
Okay, right, thank you.
No more speakers, Chairman.
Councillor Settle, and then Councillor Griffiths, and then Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chairman. It's only a small comment, but I noticed the Parish Council comments, 24th of September, says that it states there are no trees on the site. Well, there are in fact 8 trees on the site. Just wondered if Andrew could just clarify that and whether they're going to be replaced.
One of Councillor Nixon's microphone's still on.
Sorry.
One of the, you can't see it on the laptop. One of the questions on the application form, the application forms are a standard form, ask whether there are any trees on the site, and it's one that I would say 60% of applicants get wrong and say that there aren't trees on the site. It's not something that we can use to invalidate an application. It's there to identify to us whether we should be requiring tree surveys and requiring that kind of level of assessment with the application. In this case, there are trees on the site, but they're not TPO trees. They're just relatively recently planted saplings as part of the layout of the open space. So the form is wrong. The parish council are right.
I'm just wondering, we don't like to lose trees, whether we could replace the 8 trees onto the other 2 sites or something.
Yeah, there is a relatively modest element of landscaping that's provided with this scheme. There's a hedge there. There's a tree that goes there. But there's also, in planning legislation, there's this biodiversity net gain obligation. So setting aside the loss of what are relatively small and perhaps not great trees, there will be the requirement to uplift biodiversity somewhere. They'll have to deliver that as part of a scheme yet to be finalised as part of this overall development. So in terms of the parish council's concerns, the quality of the habitat in the area and the biodiversity in the area will be increased from this development.
Sorry, I forgot about the automatic BNG.
Yeah.
Councillor Collins, I think, next, and then Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's open space. It's not designated open space, but it's within the settlement boundary. And the point is, we've got a housing target. If we don't put houses there, the alternative is to put an extra 4 houses in open countryside. So I'd like to move approval.
Thank you. I note on the comments, although it's been submitted by the applicant, it does say that they have the Snowdrop Grove residents are quite happy for this to take place, which would make sense if they've not looked after the area. I do have concerns, obviously, about the UU issue, but I'm happy to second Councillor Collins on the main application.
Formally, Councillor Collins has proposed moving approval and seconded by Councillor Griffiths.
Just for clarity, Chairman, that recommendation is to delegate to officers with the new stipulation included and the stipulations previously existing. And again, that will be done, obviously, with consultation with Chairman and Vice Chairman as appropriate.
Okay. Before we move to the vote, can I just check that are there any other questions or comments that anybody wants to make? So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous.
That's unanimous.
Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Five minutes. Item 3 can be found on page 52 of your agenda papers. And again, this is regarding central area Clifton Square, temporary change of use of land, but I'll allow Rob, the officer, to take us through the presentation for this particular application.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So I think everybody's hopefully familiar with the application site. It relates to the portion of the pedestrianised square in the centre of Lytham. It's brought before members because the site is in part ownership by the council, Lancashire County Council, and there's been concerns raised by the Lytham Town Council. So just a bit of detail about the site. It obviously relates to pedestrianised surface and incorporates the mosaic, which is a central feature. There, which is a little snapshot. We've got some gate arrangement, which is a bit of a street scene kind of enhancement initiative that I think the council put in there when the square was originally pedestrianised, which is positioned to the south. Clearly it's central, it's highly visible from street scenes, so we've got Henry Street and Dickinson Terrace to the south, we've got Park Street, we've got Clifton Street to the north. There's also some listed buildings within the area that look out over pedestrianised space. We have some locally listed buildings, and the wider area is designated as a conservation area. So just a snapshot of what the scheme involves. So it's a real ice rink, it's open air and it's going to have low level hoarding. It's going to be temporary, so the period of use is from the 17th of November, which is 2 weeks away, until the 6th of January in the new year. It's going to be in use 7 days a week, Monday to Friday 12 till 9, and then Saturday and Sundays 11 till 9. There is going to be music as part of the proposal. That's going to be low level with the speakers on the inside of the ice rink hoarding, so noise is trained over the ice rink as opposed to being directed towards neighbouring properties that might be in the area. the applicant has provided an operational management plan that outlines numerous initiatives which the applicant is going to undertake during construction and during operation of the development. Clearly, one of the most important things from a construction perspective is the mosaic and making sure that's protected during construction, and obviously through the decommissioning process. So the applicant has provided some comfort to us in terms of how that is going to take place, and also has made commitment to making good any damage that might be caused. So as well as the ice rink, we've got two small timber buildings. We've got this one to the north, which is a small food kiosk. We've then got a larger building, which is where the ice skate rental and changing area will be. It is a real ice rink facility, so obviously the ice needs to be frozen 24 hours. That needs generators, which will be running for 24 hours, and those generators are positioned here. You can just make out the gated arrangement that I showed on that previous slide in the trees, so the generators are positioned in between the trees and that railing arrangement. Obviously Lytham Square has a Christmas tree, that's shown on this site plan, and obviously the proposal won't influence where that Christmas tree is positioned. There are benches and planters within the pedestrianised space. The proposals for those, I think one of them is a memorial bench as well, in fairness. The proposals is either to relocate within the pedestrianised space or relocate off-site for storage, where they will also be maintained whilst off-site. The space is also used by businesses, so for alfresco dining, they have pavement licences. The applicant, which is Lytham Business Foundation, or Lytham Business Trust, they have been in dialogue with those businesses who have agreed to either relocate or remove tables and chairs to allow pedestrians to flow about pedestrianised space still whilst the ice rink's in situ. Snapshot of what the buildings look like. The applicant also provided a nice little image of what it could look like whilst in place on the square. So main uses. So the site is public open space at the moment. Policy in V3 that does seek to prevent inappropriate development. Oddly, it doesn't protect civic spaces as it's not referenced within the policy wording. But the proposal nonetheless will obviously result in the loss, albeit temporary loss, of that public open space as its functions of civic space. Civic space, obviously, it will change temporarily whilst the ice rink is in situ, but obviously that is just a change in function as opposed to the permanent loss of any kind of POS from that site. Design-wise, we have policy GD7 that seeks high standards of design. If I take you back to the site site layout, you'll notice that the buildings that are proposed, they all turn the backs to the main street scenes. So we have this food kiosk to the north, the changing building to the south, rear elevations facing street scenes. It's not ideal to have inward facing development. Ideally, you'd want those buildings to be outward facing. So we do have harm to the character and appearance of the site and those street scenes within the town centre. For similar reasons, we also have harm to the heritage assets of the listed buildings in the conservation area. That harm, though, we would have to determine as being less than substantial because of the temporary nature of the development, and where we have less than substantial harm, we need to consider what public benefits would be from the scheme. Another main issue for consideration is residential amenity. There are residential and visitor accommodation within Clifton Square, even at first floor and second floor levels. There is potential for noise disturbance from amplified music, from people noise, and the 24-hour operation of generators. Town centres obviously there's an expectation that residents that live in town centres, they're more used to a noise environment, so they're more tolerant to more raised levels, which obviously provides some kind of justification in support of the development that's proposed. In addition to that, the applicant has confirmed that the background music associated to the ice rink is going to be low volume. Again, the position of the speakers focuses that noise source away from visitor and residential uses within the square. We also have the hours of use restriction until 9 o'clock as well. In addition, the applicants provided some information with regards to the generators that's proposed. They're going to be enclosed by an acoustic canopy. There's also going to be solid hoarding which wraps around that generator to provide additional noise protection. So on that basis, based upon the acoustic mitigation for the generators, we don't think there's a significant noise disturbance issue. There's no other technical reasons to warrant the refusal of the plan application. So there is harm to the pedestrianised space. There's harm design-wise in terms of street scenes and heritage assets. But the NPPF does allow us to make alternative decisions subject to material planning considerations. So in this respect, we have the short temporary period of the land use that's proposed, plus pedestrianised space is going to be reinstated following cessation of that use, and there are public benefits in terms of tourism attraction, the vitality and viability of Lytham Town Centre, and the economic benefits to businesses within the centre. So the recommendation to members of the committee is to grant the temporary planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob, for that presentation. Councillor Evans, please.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you, Rob. I think it's interesting that this one is the first one that's going to be realised, because previously when an ice rink's been put up, it's been a synthetic setup, and we've not had one for a few years. My principal concern would be, as you noted in your presentation, that in the years since we last had it, there's been a massive increase in pavement furniture and other businesses in the area, and my concern is the cumulative impact of competing noise, but also this has come from the business group in Lytham that think there is the need to have an additional attraction to bring people into the town. But I think it's a balancing act. There's two things I would like to add to it realistically. It's possible to get run quiet generators. So rather than mitigating and trying to soundproof the noise coming from the generators, could we not ask the applicant to look into and research actually getting quiet running generators in the first place? I'm thinking of film industry and TV programmes and things where they can't have that noise in close proximity. We can in a second, Chairman, if you'd allow me just one other point and then I'll stop. I also note that the Lytham Town Council have expressed concerns about the length of time it runs to. So, you know, I would be minded to settle for an 8 o'clock rather than 9 o'clock finish, because I think at 9 o'clock moves into the nighttime economy a bit more and attracts different usage. And if that's not possible, could we get them to knock the music and sound on the head? Because yes, it's all right saying the speakers are directed into the ice rink area, but the overspill of that noise and the competing noise from places like the Deacon that have now got open sides and more of a bar environment, it could be a bit of a cacophony at Christmas time. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, just to pick up on a few things. So the applicant has provided us with details about the specific generator. So page 64, final paragraph, that refers to the generators being well suited to the environment that they're going to be put into. So yeah, it says well suited for operation in mixed use public environments, including town centres, with surrounding commercial premises and upper floor residential or hotel accommodation. So I think there has been consideration. It's not just any kind of generator that is being proposed by the applicant. There has been some consideration of location of where it's going to be sited in relation to what surrounding uses are going to be around there. With regards to 9 o'clock, obviously, as part of the consultation process we go through about protection, they've raised no objection to the 9 o'clock cut-off. What I will say is that the last skate is reported at 8:15, so come 9 o'clock, there won't be any use of the arena at all. Equally, music and lighting associated will be cut off at 9 o'clock too. My only concern really about saying 8 o'clock is the actual justification for the hour difference. Nighttime noise acoustically is 11 p.m. at night. So for me, I'm comfortable after going through the consultation process and the negotiations and dialogue that we've had with the applicant in terms of the nature of music that's going to be there, where the speakers are going to be located, those kind of things. We're comfortable with a 9 o'clock curfew.
And just to come back in there as well, I noted in Morrison's the other day, I went to Morrison's and half the lights were turned off and there was no music on, and I thought, well, they not paid the bills or something, and they said, oh, well, this is for the sensory hour where we allow people who are challenged by these kind of things to dampen those down. And I just think it may well be that they've done the research in it, but we have an opportunity to really push back and say, if you're going to have generators kicking in to keep the ice frozen at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning, then realistically it should be the absolute quietest generators on the market that are available. You know, it's not a case of sufficient, it should be the best that we can get, because any noise, especially running through Christmas time, the town's busy as it is, there's an awful lot of noise in there, so that's a concern that I think we have got a bit of a manoeuvre to make it. It might not be the cheapest option, but it would be the best option for reducing the noise levels. And can you give us a bit of information about the food outlet? Is it going to be selling just mulled wine and hot chocolate, or is it going to be selling paninis and pancakes and goodness knows what else? Because we are not short of food outlets in Lytham.
I don't know what the food offer is going to be in the kiosk. The plans show it to be a very small footprint, so it's only 3.6 by 2.4. Lovely. So I mean that size of footprint, you could get a multitude of different festive treats, I suppose, in there. You could have mulled wine, you could have general alcohol sales, I guess. You could also have foodstuffs like paninis, waffles, those kind of things as well. So, but that kind of detail hasn't been provided, assumably because there's no operator potentially at the moment.
So potentially on that basis, if we're not really sure what it's going to be, we could put provision in to make sure that there isn't a load of boxes of food and stuff stood outside it, or a couple of wheelie bins alongside it, which would detract from the look of the town centre. And you know, those kind of things would stipulate and maybe minimise. I don't think there will be masses of food operation in there because of the space of the unit, but if you're serving drinks and things, then there needs to be adequate bins to get rid of the rubbish from that.
I think there's perhaps two options of dealing with that if members think it reasonable to do so. We could add a condition in requiring details have been provisioned to be submitted and agreed. We could delegate the decision to officers to get that detail, which would obviously, because I think time is of the essence for the operator to get on site, so we could get that detail and then formulate a condition to require that detail to be implemented. That could be another option. So. I'm happy with
that. I just want to get a sense of some of the concerns you've expressed. I just want to get clarification. Which of these, there might be all of them, are planning concerns rather than logistical organisational things, because I think they are planning concerns, I would have thought, if they could have an impact on amenity, you know, within that. In other words, you know, there could be unreasonable levels of sound or whatever it is, or ingress into areas where they shouldn't be, or bins scattered around. So I think I'm comfortable with some of the points you're raising, Councillor Evans. It's just how to deal with it, really. I mean, could we delegate it to officers to
I would
take
delegate
those
them.
concerns on
I
board?
think my concerns are, Chairman, because it is a temporary structure, then what we're basically saying is, well, it's not going to be there forever, so these things don't really matter. But for the period of time, which is has been highlighted, was it 6.5 weeks or something? It's a certain amount of time over. It's not just a weekend, and so those issues, if they do become negative issues, will cause problems. So I'm happy if those things are delegated to officers to just clarify and firm them up a little bit.
I think that's the right way forward, yes, if that's okay. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. The image, the Christmassy image, it looks amazing. It does look beautiful.
Not quite accurate though.
No. The town centres, quite often you go to Christmas markets here, there and everywhere. I'm sure most of us have done at some point. You get to see these ice rinks, you get to see all the facilities, and they are genuinely a nice Christmassy feel for the children, for the tourists. People, they are a good attraction. With the inward-facing buildings, would it be possible to ask them to have some sort of a nice street scene, like banner thing on the back of them? Could we insist on that, just to mitigate the back of a building?
We could, but to be honest with you, I don't think it's necessary. Bearing in mind that it's only in situ for a temporary period. The larger building is going to be situated behind these railings, so the railings would act to kind of break up that elevation of the rear of the boot room. The food kiosk building is positioned in this location up here. You have some street work infrastructures, and you got presence of trees as well, which is going to have some kind of mitigation against the fact that you are going to see in essence the back side of the building. So yeah, based upon that and the fact that it's temporary, then from an officer perspective at least, we don't think it's necessary.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm not opposed to it in any way at all. I think it's lovely. I do. I will be taking my grandchildren to it, which will be, if it gets passed. And I think it's quite unique. It's something that Lytham with its, just the way Lytham is. I don't know how to describe Lytham in respect. It's quaint, and this is like a quaint, Christmassy, temporary structure. So I've got no objections to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pittman.
Thank you, Chair. I also support the idea that the rink there. I think it's yes, it is an attraction at Christmas, particularly for young people. However, I do support what my fellow councillor here has said about the noise level potential, and I would be happier if young people and children had departed the scene before 9 o'clock. Lytham will be a party town during this period, particularly at weekends, and I do see that it will be a very congested area, and I would prefer not to see the noise levels, and the generators are obviously going to continue through the night, but also the general excitement, etc., that all this will create. I would prefer to see the timing of it reduced so that children, young people are out of the way by 9 o'clock. So that's my main concern.
I suppose in the proposal, this business of sort of 8:15 being the last time on the ice, and then you could see probably the level of activity diminishing then till 9 o'clock.
And how long are they there for? Do they get
Well, they'd have to be off presumably by 9 o'clock. So, and I'm just thinking about.
So it's a 3/4 of an hour stint.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering the demographics. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, really, in terms of, you know, parents with children, because children, the younger children, will be accompanied by parents. Whether they will be more attracted to earlier slots rather than the later ones, for the very reasons that some people have sort of said about nightlife and activity, etc. If you were a parent with children, you probably wouldn't go for the 8:15 slot because you don't know that it might be full or something. You might not get on the ice then. But on the other hand, you also know it does perhaps get a little bit noisier and a bit busier with other nightlife activities, you know. But I'm just thinking in the mind of parents, presumably they will exercise some judgment in terms of they'll probably go for an earlier time anyway with younger children, but maybe not older children.
Chair, just to follow up on that, obviously we are talking about Lytham Town Centre, and we are talking about perhaps one of the noisier nighttime areas of Lytham Town Centre as well, being at the bottom of Henry Street. That noise will continue beyond 9 o'clock at night for definite. I would think you probably will have to obscure quite a lot of the noise that would be associated to the ice rink in any event. But what I would say is obviously we have worked hard to get information out of the applicant. They have provided us with comfort with regards to the generators, with regards to the operation of the ice rink. We've consulted with our rent protection colleagues who don't raise objection to the proposals. They are in agreement with the hours of operations. So.
Okay, Councillor Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's, I think, really our mindset here should be looking at the positives and why, and the reasons why this is being set up. Now, being a councillor for Lytham East, I'm fortunate enough to have some contact with the business group there, and I know they've worked very hard indeed to put this together in consultation with all the businesses around. So in terms of just addressing a few of the points that's come up that I can answer, that I know that there's been conversations on, that all the surrounding hospitality points have already been involved in the conversation, aware that there's got to be pedestrian flow, and that's got to be reasonable and accessible. So I don't really see that as a concern, because they've all bought into the process already. They've all had those conversations. Now, when I look at some of the work that's been done by the council in other areas like St Anne's, you know, £3 million spent to encourage trade and get markets and a entertainment area. We're talking here about giving Lytham a short-term boost. The benefit is actually footfall. It's an uplift in trade for shops and hospitalities in the area to bring families in to what is traditionally known as like an adult play area. I don't think we can start stipulating when adults decide to bring their children in. I mean, I took my children when they were 10, 11-year-olds ice skating in Leeds, and we were out till 9 with a group from the football club. They loved it, excited. They went home tired, but having had a fantastic time. I really don't see any benefit to us getting involved in becoming some kind of nanny council, stipulating when people should be out and when children should clear out an area. In fact, that's pretty much the whole point here, isn't it? It's making it into a bit of a family area, something that's desirable to come in, where there'll be an uplift in trade, uplift in hospitality shops. Now, in terms of the small food retail point by the ice rink, well, I think that given the amount of money they're going to sink into this business, I don't know whether they're going to make money or not. I have no idea. I've not seen the business proposal. But if a bit of food retail helps financially support what they're doing and makes this something that works, then I'm all for that. And they're not going to want to spoil the chances of a repetition of this next year and the year beyond by seeing boxes and litter strewn everywhere. I mean, we're just looking for issues where I don't think there are any. So let's dwell on the benefits of this. The mitigations that the officer pointed out in terms of the town centre, I think, are sufficient, and the word sufficient have been used, to make it a bit of a Christmas town centre piazza like we see on the continent, where families stay out late, where people are out enjoying themselves. The financial benefits, potentially for Lytham, are great at a time where a lot of town centres are struggling, and I would definitely like to support this and would be happy to propose it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. It just occurred to me as well, you know, that we have these necessary discussions and concerns, and members are right to raise any potential concerns, because at least then we've had a discussion around these points, and then people can't say we never considered them. We need to consider those. But just one consideration I just want to put forward is about noise. One hopefully would hear the noise of joy, which is what we want at Christmas, with parents, young people and groups of people just enjoying themselves on the ice rink, which would bring a sort of different sort of noise and activity, but perhaps more joyous than some levels of other activity that may go on at Christmas time, and with families and groups, etc. Councillor Ledger.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I know friends and family have used it in previous years, and they'll be glad that there's realised this year, because I think that was the only feedback I remember from them previously. What I'm curious about in terms of planning is that if this is a temporary structure that's likely, has been there in previous years and is likely going to be there again in future years, I'm just curious from a planning perspective why this feels like a fresh new application in a way. And do we have should we have a policy or a repeat plan, you know, every year where we can just take a bit of feedback and from previous years and look at this quickly and, I don't know, get it through? What do we do with Lytham Festival and other things that are temporary and we do it every year?
See if we can get your answers.
Yeah, the position with Lytham Festival is a different one because there are permitted development rights that allow land to be used for temporary periods without planning permission being required. So Lytham Festival is able to utilise those rights because the activities on the green fall into a window of up to 28 days in any calendar year. So because Lytham Festival is a week or so with the build and breakdown, that's obviously less than 28 days. The proposal here is to extend it for about a 6-week period, I think. So that spans beyond the permitted development allowance. So if they were looking to do it for up to 4 weeks, we wouldn't be here because they wouldn't need planning permission to do this. But it's because of that extended period that means that permission is required. It's only, and the temporary permission is specifically for this year because I think it is, as has been mentioned, as a trial event. So it may be that there's a proposal for a bigger or a smaller or a different location or whatever, in future years. And I think the idea is to see how it goes this year, and then if it's something that's a success, then do something different next time it needs to be considered.
I'm sure the natural experience of event management of any sort is to reflect on the experience, and knowing most people who are involved in event management, including the business partnership, they would look at this event and probably their view will be, it went well, how can it be even better? And what lessons can be learned in terms of how we've set up, and have there been any particular problems? Can we Can we mitigate those problems? Can we solve them? Because clearly the intention will be, as Councillor Farrington said, is to provide a family event in the middle of Lytham at Christmas time that will also attract footfall and therefore not just benefit citizens in terms of their own enjoyment, but benefit businesses as well in terms of encouraging people into the town centre. As somebody who's been involved with town centre working groups in the past, you know, we've had long and interesting discussions about the need now to make coming into town centres an experience and not just a transactional thing where you buy things or whatever, which is important and retail absolutely essential, but making it an experience, you know, is something else that has to be provided. Councillor Goodman.
Yes, thank you. I fully support this. I think it's going to be exciting for Lytham. I agree with Councillor Farrington. As much as I'm excited as well about the Christmas market coming to Ashton Gardens, I think that's going to be brilliant. With regard to Councillor Evans' question about what will, excuse me, the little food stall be selling, this isn't to do with planning, so please forgive me, but I have not yet seen a temporary events notice for alcohol in licensing. So with only 12 days to go, I suppose there is still time, just with regard to the mulled wine issue. But I guess we'll have to wait and see that. But I do support it. Thank you.
I'm just wondering whether a consideration there was whether they would get planning permission first, but anyway, you know, and that might be a factor. I don't know. I don't know the background to that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, very exciting, and I'd like to second Councillor Farrington's proposal.
You've just answered my next question, because I was about to say we've got Councillor Farrington and we haven't got a seconder, so, but we have now. I just want to make sure, are there any questions or comments that anybody wants to make in terms of this particular application? There aren't, so we can... do we need to be very clear? I mean, it's straight...
Chair, sorry, just point of clarification with regards to discussion we had about bin storage, whether or not we're including that condition or whether we are progressing as recommended.
I think we delegated it to officers to look at those issues.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's probably the best thing, because there's a whole host of little details here that we could get bogged down in, and I think if we delegate authority to officers in terms of that. Okay.
So you're talking about formally revising the
So I think from what's being said, my understanding, and I'll look to the proposer and seconder, is that we are proposing to grant planning permission subject to the officer resolving those minor issues regarding rubbish storage, etc.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yep. Okay, so we're all clear on that. So we've got a proposer, Councillor Farrington, and a seconder in Councillor Griffiths. All those in favour, please indicate. And that is passed unanimously. Good. We wish them every success and hope it's successful.
And it appears, Chairman, there are no...
I was just about to say, yeah. There are no planning applications, sort of appeals, etc., to be dealt with here. So we have now completed the meeting. Can I thank all members and officers for their attendance, and indeed members of the public gallery.